The technology company's office glowed with LED lights, reflecting off the spotless glass windows. Employees, dressed in formal attire, hurried through the hallways, while Mary, in her blue apron, scrubbed the gleaming marble floor. To most, she was invisible, just another cleaner in a corporate world that rarely looked down. But Mary didn't mind. She needed the job to support her daughter, Clara, and took pride in doing her work well. That day, however, something felt different. She noticed furtive glances and whispers as she cleaned the hallway. There was an unease in the air. Then, suddenly, her name echoed over the intercom. "Mary, please report to Mr. Carter's office." Her heart began to race. Mr. Carter, the head of the company, rarely spoke to her. With trembling hands, Mary adjusted her apron and walked toward the imposing glass office. Inside were Mr. Carter and a few employees, all watching her with inquisitive eyes. "Mary, close the door," Carter said in a cold, authoritative voice. She obeyed, feeling the weight of the moment. "Do you know why I called you here?" Carter began, crossing his arms. Mary shook her head, confused. "There's something very serious I need to discuss with you." He stared at her for a moment, then pulled a small envelope from his pocket. "A sum of money went missing from the office yesterday, and all the evidence points to you." The room fell into absolute silence. Mary felt as if the ground had opened up beneath her feet. She blinked, incredulous. I would never do that," she said, trying to hold back tears. "I'm an honest person." "That's what everyone says," Carter replied sharply. "But we found your uniform at the scene, and the security cameras show you passing through there at the time. Denying it won't help." Mary's face burned with shame and indignation. She tried to explain herself, but her voice was drowned out by the stifled laughter of her colleagues, who were watching the scene unfold. Carter stood up and, with a firm gesture, pointed to the door. "You're fired. Pack your things and leave immediately." Mary left the office with her head down, her eyes filled with tears. She felt the weight of every gaze on her, as if she were guilty. But the greatest pain wasn't the public humiliation. It was the certainty that she was being unjustly accused. Mary walked through the deserted streets of the city at dusk, still in shock. The cold wind stung her face as she tried to process what had happened. How could she, a simple cleaner who had always worked diligently, be treated so cruelly and unfairly? The feeling of helplessness was suffocating. When she got home, she was greeted by Clara's tight embrace. Her 6-year-old daughter, with large innocent brown eyes, asked, "Mom, why are you crying?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart," Mary replied, forcing a smile as she wiped away her tears. But she knew things were far from fine. How would she pay the rent? How would she support Clara without that job? After putting her daughter to bed, Mary sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of bills. Anger mixed with the need for survival. She knew she couldn't afford to fall into despair. Her future depended on her courage to keep going. With that thought, Mary made a life-changing decision. She wouldn't just lament her situation. She would start over, but this time on her own terms. The next morning, while Clara was at school, Mary went to a community library. She spent hours studying and planning how she could start her own business. "If no one gives me a chance, I'll create my own," she thought. A small cleaning business seemed viable. She already had experience and knew how to do a good job. With the last of her savings, she bought the necessary materials and made business cards, offering her services around the neighborhood. The days that followed were tough. Mary went door to door offering her services, facing skeptical looks and rejections. But she didn't give up. After all, it wasn't just for her, it was for Clara. Her determination started to pay off, and soon she got her first client. Her first job at a small local store was done with great care. And that was enough to start generating recommendations. Mary's hard work didn't go unnoticed. Within a few months, she had expanded her client base and even hired other women to work with her. What began as a small cleaning service turned into a microbusiness. As her business grew, Mary felt something else growing inside her, a strength she had never felt before. The injustice she had suffered in the past was now just a distant memory. Her focus was on building a better future for Clara and herself. As the months passed, Mary's small business grew steadily. Her dedication and impeccable service earned the trust of important clients, and soon she had to hire more people to keep up with the demand. The makeshift office in her home, once just a cluttered kitchen table with scattered papers, began to transform. Now, there was a dedicated space for her operations, and she could even dream of having a real office. Each new client Mary gained brought her personal satisfaction, not only because she was earning money and securing her daughter's future, but because she was proving to herself that she could overcome the humiliation of the past. The name of her company, Clean Hands, reflected her honesty and the high-quality service she provided. The growth felt natural, a result of her tireless work and perseverance. One day, as she organized her paperwork, Mary received an unexpected phone call. It was from a large company in the city, interested in hiring her services for regular cleaning of their building. The contract would be a turning point for her business, ensuring financial stability and recognition in the market. She scheduled a meeting with the person in charge to discuss the details. The meeting would take place at the company's own headquarters, a towering building in the city center. This meeting meant a lot to her, not just because of the financial impact, but because of what it represented in terms of her personal growth. The humble young woman, the humiliated cleaner, was now leading a team and negotiating contracts with major corporations. Life indeed was changing. As she looked over the meeting invitation, a mix of nervousness and excitement filled Mary. This was her opportunity to take her business to the next level. On the morning of the meeting, Mary prepared herself carefully. She wanted to project the image of a professional businesswoman, someone reliable and successful. She wore an elegant blouse and tailored pants, a stark contrast to the blue apron that once symbolized her former life. When she arrived at the company's building, she was greeted cordially. An employee led her to the conference room, where she would wait for the person in charge of the hiring process. Mary's heart raced as she anticipated the importance of this meeting. When the door opened and the man walked in, she froze. It was Mr. Carter, the same man who, years earlier, had unjustly fired her. The same person who had accused her of theft and humiliated her in front of everyone. Now he was standing before her, unaware of who she really was. Mary took a deep breath, controlling the emotions that suddenly surfaced. Mr. Carter no longer looked like the imposing figure from before. His shoulders were slouched, and his face showed signs of weariness, as if the years had taken their toll on him. He began to speak about the contract, unaware of what was about to happen. "We're looking for a reliable cleaning company with good references," he said. Mary listened silently, still processing the shock of seeing him again. The irony of the situation was undeniable. Years ago, she had been cast out of the corporate world with disdain, and now here he was, seeking her help. Mary decided to keep her composure. The humiliation she had felt in the past was no longer an open wound, but a scar that made her stronger. She knew this wasn't the right moment to reveal her identity. After discussing the details, Mary accepted the proposal. Mr. Carter, for his part, complimented her professionalism, completely oblivious to the history they shared. However, fate had already planted the seed of something much larger. Mary knew that soon the truth would come out, and she would have to decide how to handle the twist of fate that had been placed in her path. In the days that followed, Mary maintained her professional demeanor, overseeing the cleaning crew that now worked at Carter's company. Each time she encountered him in the hallways or during meetings, her mind flooded with memories of the past, but she refused to let it affect her behavior. Carter still didn't recognize her, and Mary wasn't yet ready to reveal who she was. The atmosphere in the office was tense, but only for Mary. Carter seemed oblivious to the emotional weight these interactions held for her. He issued commands and made suggestions like he did with any other service provider, while Mary kept a calm facade. Inside, however, she wrestled with a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and, at the same time, an odd sense of power. The situation was now under her control, and Carter, unknowingly, was working under her supervision. One morning, During a routine meeting to review the cleaning contract, Carter began to speak casually about the challenges he had faced over the years. He mentioned, with an almost dismissive tone, that corporate life was often ungrateful and that people were sometimes misunderstood. "There was this one time," he said with a half-smile, "when I had to fire a cleaner who worked here. Poor woman got caught up in something shady. But, people like that can't be trusted." Mary, seated across the table, felt her blood boil. This was her story, twisted and reduced to an insignificant anecdote. Carter still believed she had been guilty, and now he spoke of it as if it were just another curiosity from his past. She took a deep breath, suppressing the urge to confront him right then and there. She knew it wasn't the right time, but that conversation was the final straw. Mary decided it was time to deal with the situation once and for all. She was tired of hiding who she really was, of hearing Carter talk about her as if she were a stranger. At the end of the meeting, Mary stood up, walked toward the door, and before leaving, gave Carter a direct look. "Soon, you'll remember who I am," she said calmly, leaving him confused and curious. The days passed slowly for Mary as she prepared for what was to come. She knew she had to be careful when revealing her identity, and she wanted the moment to be perfect. So, she decided to organize a major meeting with all those involved in the company, including Carter, to review the future strategies of their contract. This would be the ideal setting for the final confrontation. On the morning of the meeting, Mary dressed more elegantly than usual, presenting herself as a successful businesswoman. When she entered the conference room, Carter was already there, seated with several other employees, ready to begin the discussion. He seemed relaxed, as if the comment he had made days earlier was just another casual conversation. The meeting began normally, with employees discussing technical and operational matters. Mary listened carefully, but she knew the climax was approaching. She waited patiently until the end of the meeting, when she had the opportunity to speak. After sharing her thoughts on the expansion of the cleaning services, she paused and looked directly at Carter. "I'd like to take this moment to share something personal," she said, her voice steady. All eyes turned to her, including Carter's, who still had no idea what was coming. "A few years ago, I worked for this very company, but in a very different role. I was unjustly accused of theft and fired in front of everyone, without any chance to defend myself. Back then, I was the cleaner." The room fell into complete silence. Carter looked at her, wide-eyed, unable to process what he had just heard. "Mary?" he murmured, his voice trembling slightly. "Yes, Carter. I'm the same Mary you fired and humiliated publicly. And today, I stand here as the owner of the company that now provides services to yours." The tension in the room was palpable. Carter sat frozen, his face paling as the reality unfolded before him. Mary remained calm, showing no signs of resentment. She knew this was her moment of redemption. The justice she had sought wasn't about cruel revenge, but simply revealing the truth. She had triumphed. Carter tried to stammer an apology, but Mary interrupted him. "I'm not here to hear excuses. I just wanted you to know who I really am and how your actions shaped me. Today I'm stronger, more successful, and more just. I decide my own future, without needing your approval or permission." The room remained silent as Mary left the meeting, leaving Carter stunned. She felt an inner peace she hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't revenge that completed her, but the acknowledgement that she now had control of her own story. After the revelation, the atmosphere in the company shifted. Mary continued with her business and the expansion of her cleaning services, but the impact of the encounter with Carter lingered in the air. Reactions from employees and business partners were mixed. Some admired her strength and resilience, while others, especially Carter, seemed uncomfortable. Carter, on the other hand, tried desperately to regain his dignity, but the blow had been harsh. He avoided crossing paths with Mary whenever possible. He knew he couldn't undo what he had done in the past, but he felt the pressure to somehow make amends. His career and reputation were at stake, and he could no longer ignore the fact that he needed to face his own mistakes. A few days after the tense confrontation, Carter requested a private meeting with Mary. She, knowing this moment would eventually come, agreed to meet with him. They met in a small conference room, away from the prying eyes of other employees. Carter entered the room visibly nervous. A man who once felt invincible now at the mercy of a woman he had underestimated. "Mary, I need to tell you that I'm sorry for what happened. Back then, I was obsessed with power, with my position, and I didn't think about the consequences of my actions." Mary remained silent for a few moments, observing the sincerity in Carter's words. She didn't wish to punish him more than he had already suffered, but she also knew he needed to learn a valuable lesson. "Carter, I don't need your apology. What you did by choice without thinking about the people around you. But what I really want to know is, what are you going to do now?" Carter seemed surprised by the question. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. If that means leaving the company, I'll do it." Mary thought for a moment. Revenge was no longer what she sought. The power to decide Carter's fate was in her hands. But, surprisingly, she felt no pleasure in it. Instead, her success and her ability to transform her life were the greatest response. "I'm not going to ask you to leave the company," Mary replied calmly. "But from now on, I want you to work under my supervision. I want you to learn the value of respect and honesty, not through words, but through actions. I'm giving you a second chance, Carter, just like life gave me one." Carter, visibly emotional, nodded in agreement. He knew he was being given more than he deserved. "Thank you, Mary. I'll prove to you that I can change." With Mary's decision, the dynamic between her and Carter changed dramatically. Now, he worked directly under her supervision, and the transformation in his behavior was evident. The arrogance and pride that had once defined him gave way to humility and a willingness to learn. Carter became an efficient and respectful employee, but more importantly, he made a sincere effort to correct the mistakes of his past. Employees at the company, who knew the story, observed Carter's change with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Mary, on the other hand, remained firm in her leadership role. The power she now held wasn't used to humiliate or take revenge on Carter, but to teach a lesson that he and the rest of the employees would never forget. During this time, Mary also took a deeper look at her own journey. For years, she had carried the pain of injustice, but now, looking back, she saw how every obstacle had shaped her into the strong, resilient woman she had become. Her business continued to grow, and her daughter Clara, who was now older, was proud of the mother who had overcome so many challenges. One quiet evening, while at home with Clara, Mary decided to share the full story with her daughter. Clara, who had only known part of the tale, was impressed by her mother's courage. "Mom, you always taught me to forgive, but how did you manage to forgive someone who hurt you so much?" Mary smiled gently. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting or pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness is about not letting hatred control your life. I didn't forgive Carter for him, but for me. I needed to move forward without carrying the weight of the past." Clara looked at her mother with admiration, now understanding the true power of forgiveness. Mary's journey wasn't just about financial success or revenge. It was about finding peace within herself and building something greater than the scars she bore. Over time, Mary continued expanding her business. The name Clean Hands had become synonymous with excellence and integrity, and her growth caught the attention of investors and large corporations. The opportunities that arose allowed her to take her business to new markets, and soon, she opened branches in other cities. What had started as a small cleaning service had transformed into a network of success. Carter, for his part, kept his promise to change. Working directly under Mary's supervision, he became an efficient and respected employee. The experience of being subordinate to someone he had once mistreated gave him a lesson in humility that he would never forget. He knew he could never undo what he had done, but at the very least, he was trying to build a different future. One day, Carter requested another meeting with Mary, this time to say goodbye. He had decided that it was time to take a new direction in his life. "Mary, I feel like I've learned everything I needed to hear. I want to start over, somewhere else, with the lessons life has given me. I'm not the same man you once knew." Mary, who had closely watched Carter's evolution, knew this was the right time for him to move on. She nodded, respecting his decision. "You've done what you needed to do here, Carter. I wish you peace and hope that you continue being a better person wherever you go." Carter smiled, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and sadness. "Thank you, Mary. I'll never forget what I learned from you. And most importantly, I'll never forget the second chance you gave me." After his departure, Mary reflected on her own journey. She had faced humiliation, injustice, and pain, but in the end, her triumph was far greater than any revenge could have offered. Her success and her ability to forgive had made her stronger. With Carter gone, Mary was able to focus entirely on her future. Her business was thriving, and new opportunities were coming every day. She knew that life would still present challenges, but she now had the confidence that she could face anything that came her way. As she gazed out of her office window, looking over the city, Mary felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had surpassed all expectations, not only those of others but her own as well. Her triumph wasn't just about material success, but about the inner peace she had achieved. She knew that her story wasn't one of revenge, but of overcoming adversity and the power of transformation. Mary's journey, which had begun with tears and humiliation, now ended with success and dignity. Her legacy would be much more than just a story of professional rise. It would be a lasting example of courage, resilience, and the true strength of forgiveness.